Good afternoon. This is Ed Pozzuoli, president of Tripp Scott, with another one of our webcasts for your enjoyment. Today we're with Mayor Jack Seiler, Mayor of Fort Lauderdale. Jack, welcome.
Ed, great to be with you.
Jack, let's get right to it. Let's set the record straight as to what the city of Fort Lauderdale is doing with respect to the homeless situation.
Well, I'm delighted to set the record straight, and we've been setting the record straight for the last couple of weeks. But in fact, the city of Fort Lauderdale has taken a very comprehensive, compassionate approach to the homeless. It is an approach that isn't just about feeding, it's about turning their lives around, assisting them, providing benefits, programs, and additional things in order to help them get back on track. And it's been surprising to receive criticism, because when we were out there setting this all up, we had a number of hearings, a number of meetings, and got very positive feedback from the community for taking a different approach to assisting the homeless.
How do you deal with, though, the controversy around the ordinance, the city ordinance? Describe what the ordinance is, and then how the city is trying to address, how the ordinance addresses the issue.
Well, first and foremost, the ordinance in question is a feeding ordinance, and it involves where and when and how you can feed the homeless. And when you read the ordinance, you come back with the conclusion it's common sense, it's reasonable. These regulations were put in place for a reason. And anybody that reads the ordinance comes back to us and says, oh, I didn't know that's what it says, it's fine. But the distortion has been that the ordinance bans feeding of the homeless in the city of Fort Lauderdale. We know that's false. Everybody knows that's false. The ordinance has said that we've banned outdoor feedings in the city of Fort Lauderdale. That's also false. As it relates to outdoor feedings, we've put in reasonable restrictions and limitations on distances between feedings as to what needs to be at each feeding to provide a safe, secure, healthy, sanitary setting for the feeding. As it relates to these feedings, we don't want to have any one block or neighborhood overwhelmed, so we've established distances between the outdoor feedings.
Why is that important to have any one neighborhood not overwhelmed by one of these feedings, or frankly just by the issue itself?
Well, it's a quality of life issue. I mean,
for everybody else who lives in Fort Lauderdale.
It's a quality of life for everybody, including the homeless. You know, as mayor of Fort Lauderdale, I represent everybody, our neighbors, our visitors, our tourists, our business community, and our homeless. And there's a quality of life issue when you all of a sudden overwhelm one block, one park, one area. It's not sanitary. You have issues in terms of trying to maintain it and keep it clean. So the outdoor feedings are regulated in a very reasonable way. The thing this ordinance did, which people don't understand also, is every house of worship in the city of Fort Lauderdale has now been opened up as a feeding location. So we actually expanded the number of locations where you can lawfully feed the homeless. The churches came to us, they asked for this, so now every house of worship in the city can be a feeding location for the homeless, as well as the other indoor locations that exist. So there are plenty of opportunities to feed, there are plenty of chances, and listen, we encourage people to feed the homeless. We want to help the homeless, we want to help turn their lives around. We're not trying to restrict feeding, we're just trying to do it in the right way in the proper location.
So using the city's ability to put forth reasonable regulation, as they do with all issues, whether it's where you park, how you park, what you have required from a building permit or whatever, the bottom line is this is a reasonable regulation.
Everything. This is a health, safety, welfare regulation, and this is a very reasonable health, safety, welfare regulation. It was so interesting talking to some of the national media that once I explained the ordinance and actually went through it with them, they were like, wow, this is common sense, this is reasonable. And so we feel very strongly that what we've put in place works for the community, works for the homeless community, and hopefully we'll be able to achieve that balance where we're able to assist the homeless in this new comprehensive, compassionate manner.
So let's talk about the comprehensive, compassionate manner that you described. You know, when someone sees a homeless person on the street, there's a tendency to look at that as like all homeless are in the same situation. They're really not.
No, absolutely not, Ed. You're correct. The homeless is such a broad spectrum of who is homeless and why they're homeless and the issues of homelessness. But our approach is very broad. You look at our police outreach. We're the first city in the county to do it, and we're the only city with 2 full-time police outreach officers that just do nothing but homeless outreach. 8,000 referrals last year. They have been out there on the street working with the homeless to try to touch them, to communicate with them and find out what their issues are. Secondly, we have the only full-scale homeless assistance center in Broward County right here in Fort Lauderdale. This city commission expanded the number of beds, the number of programs, the number of benefits. Then third, you look at Mission United. It's a unique program that we're doing with the United Way, doing with the American Red Cross, actually creating a safety net for our homeless veterans when they come back from the war. We're the only, this started right here in Fort Lauderdale.
Describe that for us a little bit.
Well, Mission United is a program dedicated to providing housing and social services to veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. We started off with the new veterans coming back, and as we expand the program, we want to go back to some of the earlier wars and try to capture those veterans. But we thought the most important thing was to do it right, up front now, and capture every single homeless veteran. No veteran ought to be homeless on the streets of Fort Lauderdale. That's a goal of ours, and that's a goal we're going to achieve. I mean, they've served us, they've served our country. We have our quality of life, our freedoms, and our liberties because of these veterans. They're not going to be homeless on the streets of Fort Lauderdale. But another reason why we need to interact with them with our police homeless outreach, how do we know who the veterans are?
Right.
How do we communicate and find out who they are, what their issues are? How about that victim of domestic violence? She's on the street because she doesn't want her husband or spouse or boyfriend to find her. We can get her to a woman in distress. We can get her and her family to kids in distress. But if we can't communicate with them and find out their issues, how do we get them to the right facilities and the right resources and the right agencies? And then we're one of the only cities in Florida to have the Housing First initiative, which is also known as 100,000 Homes. It's a very progressive program to provide housing for the most chronically needy homeless that are on the street. And all of these send the message that, hey, this city is taking a very comprehensive, compassionate approach. And yet, one issue over feeding one block rather than another block has somehow tried to distort the city's position on this.
Jack, there was a little bit of a cry to stay the ordinance. Why not?
Well, because we spent months and months and months vetting the ordinance. We spent months holding hearings, listening to the experts. Most interesting thing about this whole debate has been the experts from Miami that have come up here and said, Fort Lauderdale's doing the right thing. You shouldn't have outdoor feedings. You should have indoor feedings. It's more safe, it's more secure, it's more sanitary, it's healthier, and in fact, it's the right thing to do.
So to close this out, what are the messages to those who are active in helping the homeless? What's the message from the city of Fort Lauderdale?
Well, we encourage you to continue to do so. We encourage you to continue to work with us, to continue to work with the homeless, continue to provide that assistance. This is a kind, compassionate community. This community cares. We want you to continue to care and continue to work with us, but we're asking that you do it in the right framework and within the guidelines that we've established. One of the things we touched on briefly earlier were the daily feedings. We have 54 churches that make up the South Florida, Hope South Florida network. In addition, there's 15, 20 other churches doing feedings on a regular basis. Salvation Army feeding 5 days a week. LifeNet for families feeding 7 days a week. So there are daily feedings taking place in the city under this current ordinance, and we encourage you to work with those organizations, the churches, the houses of worship, the not-for-profits, the charitable organizations, the community organizations. Let's provide that safety net for the homeless so we can really make a difference.
Well, I think that's a great note to end. Mayor, thank you for your leadership on this issue. We look forward to further updates. Thank you again.
Ed, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate this forum you've set up.